almoço. Né? É meu prazer apresentar a professora Tong, que é professor de governança cooperativa no Instituto de Economia Mundial e Política, Economia Política Mundial, da Academia de Ciências Sociais da China, CAS. E ela faz parte, desde que a gente abriu o Centro CAS, a primeira delegação que a gente recebe, e coincidiu com essa reunião, então a gente achou que seria muito bom, porque ia ter várias pessoas especialistas na China, e aqui para o Unicamp, ela vai ser uma presença duradoura, ou seja, alguém com quem a gente vai estabelecer uma relação que a gente espera dure alguns séculos, tá? Porque como a gente está na China, é tempo secular mesmo. Mas a professora Tong, ela essencialmente trabalha com governança cooperativa, e trabalha, por exemplo, faz muitos conselheiro desde 2007, se eu me lembro bem, da Bolsa de Xangai. CAS é um grande think tank do governo chinês, então também dá conselhos sobre governança cooperativa para o governo chinês. O doutorado dela em economia é da CAS, e ela vai falar sobre a reforma dos state-owned enterprises, ou seja, as empresas públicas na China, que, como vocês imaginam, com o fim do comunismo, que era onde tudo pertencia ao Estado, era um grande assunto de todo o regime e todo o povo chinês. Né? Então, vou passar o microfone para ela. É um grande prazer tê-la aqui no Unicamp. E hoje ela está fazendo um monte de perguntas muito interessantes. I'm just saying you're making lots and lots of very interesting questions. And today these people will be able to make some questions to you as well. Okay?
Thank you, Tom. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's my privilege to have the opportunity to deliver a speech on the topic of SOEs in China. Since I only have 40 minutes, right? But I have more slides. So if I have to skip some slides, you must forgive me in order to save some time for the Q&A, for the questions. So maybe you are more interested, okay? So on the topic of a recent development of SOEs reform in China, I'm going to, I'm going to present into 4 parts. First, I would like to talk about how important the role of SOEs in Chinese economy. This is maybe one of the main characteristics in China. And secondly, I will very briefly talk about the history of the Chinese reform for the past 40 years. It's not very long, but sure, it's not very short period. And thirdly, I would like to talk about a recent measure we are taking to upgrade the SOEs performance. That's maybe and finally, I may talk about the key challenges of SOEs, especially in the area of corporate governance in China. So this is the outline. This year marks the 40th anniversary of China's reform and open up, as well as the 70th anniversary of the founding of PRC, People's Republic of China. As one of the Chinese characteristics, the state-owned enterprises have been played a very important role in China. Generally speaking, in the past decades, SOE has been transformed from being affiliate of planned economy to a new SOEs. That means we try to reform it as the modern enterprises under the market economic system with gradual reformation. We don't do it radically like Russia or like Eastern Europe countries, but we take the very prudential steps, okay? So I now give you some numbers. Maybe I don't have much more time to go into very details, but for this, I may give you some, this for blue column is the number of the SOEs since start from 2005. I have to get my glasses. Excuse me.
1995. Yeah, and it goes through to 2017. That's okay.
Anyway, if you can see from this chart, in 1995, the number of SOEs were 29,000 totally. But you can see in the lower, in the 2008, that was down to the 11,000. But since 2008, the number of SOEs has been increased with a very fast pace. That's why we think maybe there are different kind of trend about SOEs. But in terms of the assets, that is the red line. You can see from in the past 20 years, the assets has been of the SOE has been increased with a very fast pace. But on the other hand, if you look at the green lines, that is the net assets. So for the green line, you can say it's not the same trend. It's an increase slower. So if you look at this chart, you can see the big gap, especially since 2008. Big gap between the red line and green line. That means for the total SOEs, there are a lot of debts of the SOEs. That is one of the problems, you see? And for this table, give you more detailed numbers. Again, I'm not going to go one by one for these numbers, but I have to let you pay attention to this one, the total SOE by ownership type. You can see that we divided total SOEs into two groups. One is central government-controlled SOEs. Another one is the local government-controlled SOEs. For such kind of things, in past, in terms of the company SOE numbers, there are a lot of SOEs controlled by local government. But now, if by that, it's almost the same. Although in numbers, the SOE controlled by central government is smaller, but in terms of the debt, they have a higher debt, right? And another number you have to pay attention to is about by A share issued by Shanghai Stock Exchange and Shenzhen Stock Exchange and by the controller, you can see that the central government control more. So do you have the light? No. Oh, okay, doesn't matter. Okay, doesn't matter. Because this is too complicated, too many numbers, so I may make you very clear. And also, you have to pay attention about the Morgan Stanley Capital International. In short, it's called the MSCI. Recent years, MSCI have been include a lot of Chinese company into that index, right? According to very recent statistics, there are about 421 A shares of Chinese are included in MSCI, in the Morgan Stanley Capital International. But I was told not all of them are SOEs. Maybe the MSCI choose more private Chinese company into the index, right? And also, you have to pay attention to the last column. If you look at the PE ratio, price and enterprise ratio, as well as if you check about the topping Q, you know topping Q, the concept. And that is a different picture. So we are told by this chart that for the middle column, it shows the state ownership bigger than 20%. But for the right column, that are the state ownership are smaller than 20%. So for the later group, they may be more marketing. So the state control less shares than the previous group. But if you compare with the efficiency and with the return, we can get the conclude that the group with higher state ownership have a lower efficiency than the lower control ownership. That is a general conclusion we can get from this table. And also, this chart shows the share of total industry assets by ownership. So the blue line is SOEs, and the red line is a private company. That also shows the similar trends since 2002 to 2017. That shows that in terms of the assets, although there are a little bit decline of SOE assets from the blue line, and from for the red line, the private sector has increased a little bit, but in terms of the return, that would be another kind of a picture. We check about the return on assets of industrial enterprises by ownership. Again, you can see that that's a vice versa. The red line, which represent the private sector, private company, they got a higher return rate than the SOEs. Though the SOEs has much more assets, total assets, not the net assets, than the private. So that means for private sector, there are more efficiency than the SOEs. And this chart shows the debt level of Chinese SOEs. It shows the similar structure about that since 2002, the SOE debts increase in a very fast way, right, in the column. And also, the blue line shows SOE index as a percentage of GDP. We can see that the percentage of GDP now is very high. In 2001, the percentage was 70%, but in the right now, by the end of 2018, the percentage is 120% of total GDP, which is a huge debt, right? Again, if we look at the leverage of industrial enterprise by ownership, let's also see that if you see there is a cross, in past, the private sector has a higher leverage before 2008. But after that time, the SOEs have a higher leverage than private sector. So for this kind of several members, we can see that on the one hand, SOEs has controlled a lot of national assets, and also have taken a very high debt ratio. In past, it was as high as 70% for debt ratio. Now it's a little bit lower. The number is about 64%. Still very high. So this is one of the problem, but we also can conclude from the previous table and the chart that shows in terms of the return and the efficiency, SOEs usually has a lower efficiency than the private sector. So that is why we need to take a further reform of SOEs. So this also tell you about the government central control SOEs profit. You can see that in the past 5 years, the SOEs, the central SOEs profits has been a little bit increased, even be better for 2019, for this year. But still, it's flexible, not very stable, okay? So now I would like to use a tool to analyze about the SOEs. The vertical line is a good corporate governance. The horizontal line is a good corporate governance. And the vertical one is about marketing. So now we got the 4 quadrant, right? So what we called SOEs is just from the quadrant 3. That is a very low marketization and low corporate governance, and change into the 4th quadrant. That means we hope in the future all the SOEs must transformed to the new SOEs. That's maybe more market-oriented and with the good corporate governance. So now I would like to give you a very brief history about the past 40 years. It can be attribute to the three stages at 3 levels. 怎么了？听不见。Okay, okay. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. If you cannot hear me, just let me know, okay? For the first stage, that was from 1978 to 1992. In this stage, we can see that this enterprise the government gave the SOEs more decision-making power, delegated power to lower level, and surrounded part of the profit, the adopted contract responsibilities system, and also we have carried out a 2-step tax for profit reform. That is a main task for the first decades. And the second stage was from 1993 to 2013. That is called to establish and improve the multi-enterprise system and the state-owned assets management system. So the landmark of this period was in 1993. The third plenum of 18th Communist Party of China put forward the reform of establish a modern enterprise system. But also at the same time, at the end of the same year, 1993, the first company law was promulgated for the PRC. And at the same time, we put the SOEs on the reform track with a joint stock system as the main form of SOEs. This is the second stage. And the third stage, we can see that since 2014, the main content of this stage reform is we took a great effort to improve the SOEs by the assets management system and promote state-owned equity reform, which also focus on the capital management. So since the past 5 years, there are a lot of reform have been undertaken by the central government as well as the local government. And for the recent reform have been also focused on the capital management. That means state-owned equity reform. That is very important expression for nowadays. And in 2015, President Xi Jinping has forwarded the 3 favorable standards to judge whether the new round of SOE reform is successful or not. That is, 1, whether it can be improved the amplification of function of state-owned capital. And second standard is that whether it can ensuring the appreciation of the state value. And third one, whether it can raise the SOE's competition, both domestic and in international market. So these are the 3 judgments, okay? But we all know SOE is not the only Chinese character. It exists all over the world. The difference is that in Chinese economy, the SOE has taken a very large amount of the portion, both in terms of the assets and as well as in terms of the profit. So if such kind of big assets with a low return, that will be influence the total economic growth. That's why we have to, in the past 40 years, we take different stages with different main focus. But the general aim for the reform is just to improve the efficiency of state-owned enterprises. So according to OECD, they publish some lot of numbers of report and research. They have pointed out that there are some distinct governance challenges of the SOEs. That means, on the one hand, it always has been suffered the undue hand-on and politically motivated ownership interference. On the other hand, there will also be a dilution of accountability. That is another challenge. And the more we can start about SOEs, there are quite a complex chain of agents. So the agent problem of SOEs are even severe than the other type of the company. So to finish or to face such kind of challenges are not the easy job. In 2003, Chinese government has formed a new administrative branch that is called State-Owned Assets Supervision and Administration Commission. In short, we call it SASAC, S-A-S-A-C. SASAC, the main task of SASAC is to be behavior like an investor. But if you look at what they have been doing for the past decades, I think they maybe have some wrong position or not a very proper role. On the one hand, the SASAC would be a big shareholder, and they would like to ask these SOEs to give them more returns. But on the other hand, SASAC more act like more than a shareholder. So that means sometimes they give less power to the board of directors of SOEs, and the SASAC control a lot of power by themselves. For example, for the main appointment of SOEs and more senior manager, the SASAC keep this power. So this is just a gradually change, but generally more or less it's things like that. On the other hand, from the function of SASAC, it can be seen from the work that has gone beyond the responsibility of investors. And that means it partly exercises the power of a shareholder and the board of a director. That's what I talked just now. So SASAC was authorized by State Council and also performs the investor's responsibility. According to the website of SASAC, there are 6 main tasks or main functions for the SASAC. That is, one is to supervise and manage the state-owned assets. Secondly, the SASAC's role or function is to supervise the preservation and the increasement of value of state-owned enterprise. And thirdly, SASAC will guide and push forward the reform of the restructuring of SOEs. That's also a very heavy task. And the fourth one, SASAC would like to prepare the strategic adjustment of the layout of the state economy. And the fifth one, SASAC is responsible to points and remove also, as well as to evaluate the top executive of SOEs. And last but not least is to undertake the task assigned by the State Council. So for some matters, even the SASAC cannot decide. It has to be asked for higher rank of the government. That is a general function. So for my opinion, I think the correct compensating of the SASAC is very much a key for the subsequent of SOE's reform. That's a prerequisite. Without the SOE reform requires the reform of state-owned assets supervision system. Without this prerequisite, the SASAC should become the qualified investors and exercise the shareholders' right to state-owned capital according to the company law. And I think that's very important. And the SASAC oversees most central SOEs, currently in numbering that's smaller than past, but still the SASAC control 96 big SOEs in total. And for this central state-owned enterprise, they are also further divided into two groups. One is called the important backbone state-owned enterprises with the vice ministerial rank equivalent. And also on the another group, it can be no-con firms that with a department level rank equivalent. The local government department and the local SASAC also control the area of the local SOEs, right? So again, according to the OECD's guideline, we can see that OECD suggests that the country as an active owner should fulfill the responsibility in 7 aspects. So I'm not going to read this for the 7, but if someone are interested, you can look at the report published by the SOEs. That is what SASAC should do. That is one level. The second level, requirement the country or requirement the government as an owner is to ensure the effectiveness of corporate governance of SOEs. Again, this is still the challenge all over the world when you deal with the SOEs, not only for China, but for any country with SOEs. And the third level, according to OECD, that require on the country like an owner is exercise ownership in a transparent and accountable manner. That's also very important field we need to undertake. So with that in mind, we talk about the new round SOE reform in China. So this is, okay, fine. So there is a new agency called the State Administration for Market Regulation, in short, SAMR. This was set up as a part of the major readjustment of government institute. The purpose of SAMR is to remove the systematic and institutional obstacle that prevent the market from play a decisive role in resources allocation and enable the government to better play its role. And also, the highest profile example of the mixed ownership reform is stated in 2017, the restructure of China Unicamp, Shanghai-listed flagship subsidiary, which raised about $11.7 billion from the group of most private level. For this mixed ownership reform, we can say that has exerted a great influence. It not only helped preserve and increase the value of state-owned assets, but also improve the efficiency of the SOEs. Here, there are some different four bunches of the group have been changed for the mixed ownership reform. But for the outcome, I can give you a very concrete example how the China Unicamp have been taken the mixed ownership reform. So during the process, they bring out about 13 strategic investors, such as BATTJ, very famous Chinese, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, and Jingdong. That's all the very biggest the private company. They both invested to the China Unicamp and also send the board of directors into the board. So the ownership structure has been changed. The China Unicamp group dropped from more than 62% to about 36%. And there are a lot of small shareholders. And the new board was formed. There are 5 independent directors with the 11 members sitting on the board. Of them, 9 independent directors, 3 are from the original China Unicamp group. But remind, there are 5 directors came from strategic investors, mainly from China Life, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, and Jingdong. So this kind of diversified board has hold a lot of business stars, okay? But I can show you after a year of the reform, there are quite a lot of changes for that mixed reform. On the one hand, the shareholder share structure has been changed, that's for sure. And also, there is a diversified board, okay? And the third aspect for the change is about incentive mechanism. So now, as many as 7,000 employees got restricted ballot with performance conditions. The new contracted managing right model in order to reserve loss. So also they set up the exist mechanism for managers, right? So as the result, the outcome is quite promising. We can see that in the last year, the revenue of the new Unicamp is more than 200 billion RMB. That increased 6.5% than the previous years. But compared with another big mobile company called China Mobile, the revenue only increased about 0.3%. So this is a big contract. On the other hand, in terms of the profit, the new Unicamp have increased about 95.5% compared with last year. And also, the good news is that the assets liability ratio has been increased from 62% in 2016 to 42% in the last year. So this also quite a lot of change. Financial expense declined almost 100% last year than the previous years. So that is a very one example. Another aspect for the recent reform. How many time do I have? 2 minutes? Okay, 2 minutes, okay. There are a lot of measures has been going on for this kind of development. I just mentioned a few. On the one hand, there is some transformation of supervision of the SASIC, both in central SASIC as well as in local SASIC, right? And on the other hand, there are reorganizing and setting up state-owned capital investment and operational company. So they try to restructure the new SOEs compared with the old one. And the most important change is that we have organized several state capital management company that took two kind of reform. So this is quite obviously phenomenon for the recent years. And I will not talk about detail about the reform for the local government. And also, we have classified all the SOEs into two kind of group. One is called the public class or the commercial class. For such two kind of group of SOEs, they have different aims and different profitable aims. That's quite divided into the two groups. And on the merger, there are a lot has been going on for the merger between the big SOEs, as also as between the SOEs and the private company. So this has been changed quite. I gave you some one example about China cultural shaping, because of the time, I'm not going to go to detail, but again, the outcome is very promising. And also talk about the recent development. There are quite a lot of going on at provincial level. And also there are some steps forward to improve the corporate governance. That is for sure. And on the other hand, there is a new trend about more relaxed regulatory environment from the government. So this is a very new measures has been taken for this year. And on the other hand, we can say that there are new platforms have been set up for better management for the state assets. So for general speaking, there are quite a lot of new reform to try to improve the incentive mechanism as well as to improve the efficiency of state-owned enterprises. In conclusion, we can say that to sum up, the SOE reform at both the central and the local level has been remarkable progress in the past 5 years and will continue in the future. But the SOE capital management system reform with the focus on capital management cannot be simply viewed as the development of mixed ownership. The concept of the mixed ownership can solve all the problem is wrong. So the discussion of SOE reform from the perspective of the property protection should be put on the agenda. And from the angle of improving corporate governance of SOEs and strengthening restraint and incentive mechanism, it is imperative to reform the incentive mechanism. To me, I think that should be put into the first priority. The future reform will be based on the competitive neutrality as well as the ownership neutrality. SOEs and private enterprise should be equally treated, stick together in times of difficulties and complete on the basis of quality. So with that, I will conclude my presentation. Thanks for your patience.
I think we've got a problem of time, yeah? Yeah. Sally, we have one question, or there are so many questions raised by this. I think maybe we just, okay. We just ask for Professor Dussel to give a question, yeah? Because it just sounds the complexity of the whole system is enormous, and you have all these mechanisms to control it, and it seems like they become oligarchies in their own way, with their own power, but they work to, how would I say it, they have objectives, but then you have to put in another layer of power to control them, you know. So it's going to take a long time, it seems to me, maybe generations, yeah, to transform that.
Not easy though.
Yeah, I can understand.
Yeah, yeah.
This is just what strikes me, is the enormous complexity.
Right.
Like one question there. We just have one thing then. The professor is going to be here today and tomorrow, so there'll be plenty of time to...
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. It's very interesting. I hope we can have access to your presentation because it was a lot of details. But anyway, my name is George. I'm from the Federal University of ABC with ABC. I have two questions that came across my mind. First, one of the issues that Trump is raising in his so-called trade war is exactly the use of state-owned companies by China in international economic relations. So my question is, to what extent this reform is also responding to questions raised about China being a market economy or now by other governments, especially US and Europe government. And the second thing is that especially the Europeans, but also the United States, they are trying to put into international trade agreements, and they have done it in the trade agreement between Europe and the Mercosur, this whole paragraph on state-owned companies, and that says that a state-owned company must operate as if it is a private company. So that would mean that the government cannot anymore use state-owned companies for public policies. So that would be a restraint. And I don't know if you understood my question and if you can comment on it.
Okay, you raised very good questions. And the first one referred to the trade war, and with the SOEs. We have pay much more attention to such kind of issues, since the Trumps has raised a lot of questions about how to behave of SOEs in the international market. And our response about this issue is that the Chinese government is ready to take the concept of competitive neutrality. So I gave you two obviously facts that last year the governor of the central banker, Yi Gang, have been speeched in the International Banking Conference, says that Chinese central government is ready to take this concept and take some measures to change our competitive environment. That means we must be very serious about the issue of that competitive neutrality. So that is one. And also for the last spring of this, the Prime Minister's government report, Li Keqiang has quite a lot of big content talk about how the current government are taking the measures in order to change towards the equal competitive environment, both for SOEs and for private sector. And your second question is actually related to your first one. So we also noticed that in the international scenario, and this is a quite uniform stance, both for Europe, EU, and Japan, and the US. And we can see both for the bilateral trade agreement as well as multilateral, like in the frame of the WTO. Maybe in the future, they are going to talk about the WTO's reform. That will take much more attention to the issue of SOEs, as well as the issue of the how to keep the SOEs in the right track. But obviously, we cannot sell all the SOEs to the private sector, because this is a very big asset. No one can absorb. So we must take this in consideration in a very subtle consideration. That means, on the one hand, we must keep the direction of a marketing system in both domestic as well as in international competition. So not only when the SOE going abroad, you must be behavior like the real corporation or real company, not just a subsidiary from the government. But on the other hand, it takes time. You cannot expect that the SOEs has been transformed or has been changed within with a short period. So what I myself think that we have to be patient, but we have to put this reform or this competitive neutrality in the right direction. We have to put the pressures on this direction, but we are not so naive to believe it can be changed in 1 or 2 days. So with that, we understand what the international concerns about the Chinese SOEs, and what I conclusion that the Chinese government is ready or part of the ready to change, to work on it, and to make things better.
Thanks for a fascinating answer to a very difficult question, and thank you for, I think anybody who thought that China was complex now understands how complexities are inside complexities are inside complexities, like those little balls, or the Russian dolls, Okay, thank you very much, Professor.